Well, welcome back to the mainstream. John, how you going?
Oh,
Wait, it's not John, it's Saxon. Saxon, how you going?
I'm good, Dan. How are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. Not much to talk about at the moment, is there?
No, it's very quiet.
Very quiet.
No, nothing going on, There's no war in Iran. There's no, fuel crisis, energy crisis, housing crisis, immigration crisis.
No by-elections
Nothing going on.
coming up.
No by-elections, no by-elections that have happened or going to happen.
No. So let's dig into that a little bit. The by-election we just had one in Victoria, in the PN, and then there's obviously the federal one coming up in Farah. So these are important by-elections because they give an on-the-ground indication of what is actually happening. So we've got the polling showing One Nation is 20 to 25%. We've got some on-the-ground data. South Australia election shows that they can win seats. That they can win votes off Liberal and obviously the Labor Party as well, as John and I discussed the other week. They took not just a lot of votes off Liberal, but they took a lot of votes off Labor as well. So when we look at Nepean, let's just quickly talk about that. So basically the Liberal Party held the seat, as it was expected to do. The Labor Party didn't even run a candidate. So that's how toxic Labor Party is in the outer suburbs of Melbourne. One Nation ended up, 22?
24%.
24%. And the Teal candidate got about the same as well. So my assessment is it confirms what's happening, which is we have a fractured vote on the right. The Liberal Party primary went down by 10%, which is a pretty big drop. One Nation, in my view, probably underperformed a little bit. If they've got a statewide vote of about 24 and they got 24, you would say that that's on the money, but Nepean takes a lot of outer suburban seats, so a lot of outer suburban areas of Melbourne. So I would have expected that One Nation would do whatever their statewide vote is. I would have thought they'd do a bit better in outer suburban electorates as well. But what do you reckon?
It's a bit of a peri-urban seat where it takes in sort of the very outside of what you might consider Melbourne and goes further into the Mornington Peninsula. I think that it was a bit of an underperformance, particularly because it's in that more regional area of the seat. It is very much tradie central. It is very much their base. But what I took out of it is that actually the centre-right or right-wing vote in the seat increased, because while the Liberal Party's vote only decreased, the primary vote only decreased by 10%. One Nation didn't run a candidate there in the last state election,
That's true.
and it went up to 24-ish%.
Right.
Which means that the centre-right vote is over 50%, is almost 60% in that seat. And you can tell because the Greens' primary vote plateaued. It stayed the same. It stagnated, which means that the left-wing vote decreased, and a lot of Labor voters, some went to the Teal, clearly, but that means a lot of Labor voters actually went straight to One Nation, rather than voting for the Green or voting for the Teal.
Well, that's a really good insight, actually. I hadn't thought about that. So, you've got this phenomenon, again, that we saw in South Australia, which was overridden by the fact that the Liberals were absolutely decimated. But as I said with John, look, One Nation got close to winning 3 seats off the Labor Party in Elizabeth, Taylor and Light. So, I think this trend of One Nation winning a lot of Labor voters continues. Obviously Labor didn't run a candidate, so to me that shows that they're pretty toxic. I think they would have come fourth, third or fourth. They would have finished behind, obviously, Liberal, One Nation, the Teal, and then maybe the Green, maybe not. I don't know what their primary would have been, but I can't imagine it would have been much more than 10%.
Labor Party.
Yeah.
I think it would have been above the Greens, I think.
Right.
It would
What
have
did they get? 10?
About 13%.
13, yeah.
So I think it definitely would have finished below One Nation, the Liberal Party, and the Teal, particularly because when you look at the federal level, the federal equivalent seat of Flinders, Labor didn't finish in the top 2 then either, and they romped the last federal election. So I think the Labor brand, very much in Victoria, is very toxic at the moment, as you've said.
Yep.
And I think it's quite ominous for them, the fact that a lot of their votes went straight to One Nation, and rather than going to their sort of preference harvesting spots like the Teals and the Greens. I think it could potentially be quite ominous, even though One Nation underperformed. I don't know what you think, but I think that the Labor Party didn't come out of... No one really won at Nepean.
Yeah.
The Labor Party didn't their votes went straight to One Nation. Many of them did. The Liberals held the seat. There's no gains. They had everything to lose and nothing to win, really.
Yeah.
And One Nation held the polling average that they've got in the one seat. But there are plenty of seats around Victoria where I imagine that sort of statewide or countrywide 24% will increase into the 30s, where they are actually in a position to win seats.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair point. I think in terms of the, has One Nation peaked or not, probably, I would say overall, probably not quite. I mean, they sort of bounce around a little bit around there, but we'll see that with Farah, which we've got the election on Saturday. Now, all the indications are it's a One Nation versus Teal contest, but I think it's going to be pretty hard to know, which way it's going to go, because we haven't had many contests like this before, where it's, neither of the major parties are in with a chance. Now, there's some people who say that they reckon the Liberal Party will overperform because the vote's going to come off One Nation, and they reckon it might go back to the Liberal Party. I'm not so sure that's going to happen, but I think this is a really genuine test of for One Nation as well. I think, being the favourite for a seat is something that is not usual for One Nation. So it's a different sort of psychology. When you're behind, you're the underdog, you're fighting away. If you lose, you lose, and you gave it a good go. If you win, well, it's like in footy, good on you, you won. But when you're the favourite, it's a different, you're top of the ladder, the pressure's on, you've got to kick the goals, you've got to win. So this is a really important test, because I think if One Nation is able to win, even if it's only by a handful of votes, then that is obviously going to continue the momentum as they go to the New South Wales state election in March of next year, which will then parlay into the federal election. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on the Farah by-election?
Well, if One Nation are able to win, it adds vital infrastructure to the party structure. You're able to hire more staff, you're able to have more political representation, and that translates between state and federal politics, obviously. As you well articulated, it's a very different situation. It's a very different spot that they find themselves in actually defending a seat.
Yeah.
Or not defending, but defending a lead for a seat, or a perceived lead for a seat. Yeah. Because all of a sudden, all the attack lines and all the focus is on you. You can see this clearly. Even though the Labor Party again aren't running in this seat, they are constantly attacking the Liberals via One Nation by saying, well, why are you preferencing One Nation?
Yeah.
The Liberals and the Nationals have been very forward in attacking One Nation in Farah as well, questioning the sort of the ideological allegiances of David Farley. And we'll see how well they cope with that kind of pressure and that kind of attention. I suspect that they will win. But, you can never tell. Polling in these regional seats is quite difficult, and we'll see. But I think it's important that one of the centre-right parties hold the seat, particularly because it's an inflection point for both One Nation as a party to see whether they can translate this quite positive polling into results, and also for Angus Taylor as a leader. Because if the Liberals do lose the seat, all of a sudden all that pressure is going to unload onto Angus as leader. Because if he can't stem the bleeding that the Liberals have been experiencing for, let's face it, 4 years, then all of a sudden, time becomes a very rare commodity.
Yeah. I think in terms of stemming the bleeding, I think there's some signs that it has happened. Like the coalition polling seems to have plateaued or pulled back a little bit. Now, I reckon there's two reasons for this. I reckon the first is Matt Canavan assuming leadership of the Nationals Party. And because the polling now doesn't split up Liberals and Nationals as it did when they were separate. So we don't know how much of the improvement has come from the Nats and how much of it has come from the Libs. But I think probably to start with, a lot of it came from Canavan. And I think the other part actually is the immigration policy that the Liberal Party announced, which, as I've said before, I think it's one of the best policies that the coalition has had for probably a decade. And there's basically three parts to the policy. And what is a bit of a shame is that it hasn't really been, like, for whatever reason, they haven't campaigned or talked about it a lot, at least from what I've seen. But the three key points are to deport people that are basically here unlawfully. So these are people that have overstayed their visas. So there's about 65,000 people, which is a very significant number. The second is to actually have an enforceable values test where if you transgress a statement of Australian values, whatever that statement ends up being, then that's grounds for revoking your visa and therefore deportation. And then also to have what they call like a safe country list, which is to prioritise people that come from safe countries. Now, this is a pretty big deal, right? I mean, like this type of policy would have been inconceivable. It would not have been sort of considered acceptable within the political class even 6 months ago, I reckon, or a year ago. So I think it's a very strong policy. I think it's helped bring some people back to the coalition, but I haven't seen them really talking about it a whole lot. I don't know. Have you seen much chatter about it?
I haven't seen much chatter, and to sort of give them a bit of a break on it, but not entirely, is that, like, obviously there's been a quite significant fuel crisis which has dominated the airwaves, and this Farah by-election has dominated the rest of the airwaves. But even before this fuel crisis, and even before the sort of the by-election date, or when it really started to roll, they hadn't really they hadn't done a lot of work post the actual development of the policy. To actually
Why is that, do you think? I found it curious because I was like, oh, okay, here we go. Like, here's a good policy. It's a strong policy. Here's, and I don't want to say this from the perspective of like the politics of it, but like the country not only needs to have a debate about immigration, which we're now having, but it also needs to have a way of fixing the problem.
Yes.
And Labor isn't going to fix it. They've got the Bondi Royal Commission, which in my opinion is a complete joke. And I've said it should not have been undertaken because it was always going to be a political whitewash, as we've seen. It's only like fixing this is only going to come from the centre right of politics. And I think it's a good policy because it's actually going to help fix some of the problems that we have. But yeah, I was a bit surprised that they didn't do a whole lot. But I mean, why do you think? I mean, I know you've said.
Well, I think because the policy is a little reactive. I'm not convinced that the policy itself has come from a place of principle, because the coalition, especially the Liberal Party, for a long time haven't been strong on immigration policy, and I think that this policy is very reactive to the views of the community. Our polling showed that the vast majority of Australians, almost 8 in 10, want net migration to be below 100,000 people.
Yeah. And context is, so it's been on average over 400,000.
Yeah.
So they want it cut by a lot.
Yeah. They want it to reduce by like 200%.
Yeah.
Whereas, it's not going, whereas the coalition have, at least historically, over decades, like 6 decades or so, have been the party of higher elevated levels of immigration, whether it be usually legal immigration.
Yeah.
And I'm not convinced that it's from a place of principle. Whereas if one nation had come out with an immigration policy, you would broadly believe that they genuinely believe in it. Whereas I'm not convinced that that a lot of coalition MPs are principled in their immigration stances currently. And it's an unfortunate thing to say, and I don't like saying it. But that might be why it hasn't been spruiked as much as it has, compared to, let's say, some of the national MPs and senators that have come out with the immigration stance. I generally think that there are many Liberal MPs that are not happy about the immigration stance, and also with the net zero stance, with like getting rid of the policy of net zero as well.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I mean, I sort of think that there are a number who do believe in it. Like they support it. Some feel compromised, as you've outlined. Government's been coalition was in government for a decade. So therefore they feel that maybe, they can't go back on what they were a part of. But I do think that there is an understanding that this policy is pretty important. I also think it has actually been thought through. Like some of it, like there's pressure just to put a headline number out and say we're going to cut it to whatever number. But what they've put out does have an element of detail, which to me suggests that it's been thought through at some level. So I have a bit of confidence in it in terms of the process anyway. But you did mention something that spooked my interest, which was about basically do people in the community, what kind of trust do they have? Not much.
They don't trust the coalition.
So that's what the polling suggests. They're not convinced
that
they're going to get it done if...
That that they would be more likely to vote for the coalition if they put out a strong immigration policy, which they've done.
Yes.
But then the same proportion of people don't believe that they'd actually go through with it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I think that's a huge problem that they're going to have to overcome.
Well, this is the same issue that the Tories have in the UK.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I think a lot of the Tories' policy is actually very good. But again, it hasn't always cut through. There are signs that it maybe is at the moment cutting through, but there's the various electoral tests coming up that'll help weigh that up. Hi, thanks for watching. Did you know that 3/4 of you watching this podcast aren't currently subscribed to the IPA's YouTube channel? So do us a favour, hit subscribe and you won't miss any of the action. While you're at it, head to ipa.org.au, follow the prompts to subscribe to the IPA's website, so that way you will find all of our research and analysis. Now back to the chat. The other thing you mentioned, though, was really interesting, which was one of my favourite segments, is the net zero is dead segment. And just over the last, it's so interesting how these things happen because, it's amazing what a war will do. It's actually brought to a head this idea that, maybe having our own fuel is important. Maybe we need to have our, maybe having all of our oil come in by ship is a bit of a problem, and maybe it will need to be addressed. So we've seen a lot of developments over the last few days on policies that would be considered to be manifestly in opposition to the idea of net zero. Yes. So firstly, Albanese was talking about how he wanted to build another oil refinery. Now, I think that's been kiboshed, but you go, wow,
Yeah, exactly.
How does that work with the policy of net zero? We've just had, it was literally only a few hours ago that the Victorian government had an announcement with the Commonwealth government of the approval of a new petroleum production licence to develop the Annie gas field off the Victorian coast, and also that the federal government is seeking nominations of new areas of offshore petroleum exploration in Victoria and Tasmania. So this is quite significant. We've had, obviously, in Queensland as well, the LNP government there has indicated that it wants to expand its exploration of oil and gas. Yeah. And then also, I just want to read this out because I think it's fascinating, which is in New South Wales. Again, only a couple of days ago, the Legislative Council passed legislation, and this was because of the leadership of John Ruddock, who's the MLC for the Libertarian Party, who was a key mover of this, to repeal elements of the uranium mining and nuclear facilities bill, which would actually allow the mining of uranium. So not for the use of it in a domestic capacity, but again, this is another example of how the debate has shifted a lot on this topic. Now, whether this legislation it then needs to go back to the Legislative Assembly, so whether it will pass, I personally doubt it, but it may. And, Chris Minns as Premier has done some sensible things. He expanded the Eraring coal-fired power station as an example as well. So we're starting to see a lot more of the net zero edifice fall under the weight of the fact that petrol prices were $3 and there was a realization that we can't keep going this way.
It's amazing what can happen that once material needs aren't being met, how much of the other stuff that the government supposedly cares so deeply about doesn't matter anymore. Stuff like fuel, energy, the ability to, cook your food and keep the lights on and stay warm in winter are actually like base needs that people need to live in modern society.
Yeah.
And if
they expect.
Exactly. It's literally the bottom need, the most important need in like Maslow's pyramid. Right?
Yeah, the hierarchy. Yep.
Exactly. So, you can't just expect people to, sacrifice those to meet emission reduction target and climate change targets set, all over the world, essentially, and not here in Australia, particularly when, as we all know, Australia is a minuscule player when it comes to global emissions.
Yeah.
And you can't expect people to say, well, you're going to have to keep, Earth Day, where you keep your lights off for an hour on Earth.
Is that still a thing?
I don't.
Wasn't it like a week or two ago?
I don't know. I've never cared for it.
I remember at school it was a big deal.
Yes.
And I remember berating my dad to turn off all the lights at whatever 7 p.m.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't do it.
Yeah, exactly.
He knew it was. Yeah. He knew it was.
But we're gonna have Earth Day every day if we continue net zero, essentially. But that's ridiculous, right? It's outrageous, and you can't expect people to commit to that. or be mandated to commit to it. And as you said, amazing what happens with a war when supply chains get completely disrupted, and we've committed to all of these deindustrialization priorities in order to meet things like net zero, or before that the Paris Climate Agreement, or before that Kyoto, in which that we've completely sacrificed our sovereign capability. I grew up near the most recent refinery to close down in Altona.
Yep.
And now it's completely shut. It would cost billions of dollars to reopen, and it's now just an import terminal.
Yeah.
And that happened just 4 or 5 years ago. Like, we could have stopped that.
It should have been stopped. It should not have been allowed to close.
It should not have been allowed to close, nor any of the other ones that have closed.
So you didn't get taught about Earth Day at school, did you, or not?
Oh no, I did. Yeah,
just in this.
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
I taught Earth
But it's
Day.
kind of fizzled out, hasn't it?
Maybe I'm not in school anymore.
No, but I don't think it's a big thing I don't really sense it's a big thing. Well, there used to be billboards, and like they put up billboards about it. Now they don't have any.
Well, I mean, you don't have to have a billboard celebrating Earth Day, I suppose, when you're inundated with climate change,
No, that's true.
and emission reduction propaganda constantly.
Yeah.
But I think this whole brand, this net zero brand, has become a little toxic for the government.
Yeah.
I'd say, because Albanese
We're not even
hasn't
talking about
mentioned it. No.
No, it was Bowen. They very rarely use the word net zero.
Yeah.
And they didn't use the word net zero in the announcement of a new policy to have a domestic gas reserve.
I wonder why that.
So this is just another recent announcement, which I think is fascinating. That the government has announced that it's going to force all of the LNG exporters to divert 20% of their export into the domestic market, which is basically a replication of what Western Australia has, which is, you've got to keep a certain amount of your gas for domestic use. So, this policy is very interesting. It is in response, I think, to the calls for a tax on gas exports, which sort of will probably have a similar effect, actually, won't it? Because if you tax gas exports, then that would theoretically mean there's more for domestic consumption. Although maybe you're going to tax them so much that they get rubbed out of the market altogether. So
I suspect
that's more likely.
I suspect that's more likely.
Right.
So I think the reservation policy is better than there are pros and cons with it. But similar to what I was mentioning before, with certain coalition members and immigration, there'd be so many Labor MPs and Labor senators and high up Labor people that would rather shut down the gas industry altogether than have a reservation policy.
Well, the point of the tax, the export tax, was all, for at least a lot of people, was to further rig the market in favour of wind and solar. Yeah. Because, as you say, if you tax, if you rub out the gas industry, then obviously it's going to favour wind and solar. But it is another interesting thing, which is how going back a number of years, the activists were focused on coal.
Yep.
And there were a lot of elements of the gas industry that were quite happy to let that happen, right? Because for them, it was like beauty. Coal's getting attacked.
Yeah.
They're going to leave us alone. We're going to have a bigger market share. And the point that we always made is, like, you're dreaming. Like, they're going to come after you next. You don't understand how this works, guys. They're going to establish a campaign infrastructure and a precedent. And that's exactly
what happened, yeah.
And those gas executives got towed up at the Senate committee because they weren't really... I mean, some of the questions that were put to them were pretty disingenuous, but they weren't really... It seemed to me that they had kind of lost the ability to really argue their case.
Yeah.
And this is one of the reasons why... the idea that you just let the activists go after someone else because it will placate them is just fundamentally wrong. And
absolutely.
I've seen time again that that's not what happens.
No, you have to stop them in their tracks. And there's something that centre right has failed to do, and a lot of industries have failed to do over a range of different areas. Like, with you can see this with the Voice result, for example. Like, we won the war. Like, the Voice was defeated.
By mainstream Australians.
Mainstream Australians won the war. They rejected racial division. But you're still seeing treaties. There's still a state voice.
Yeah, there's a state voice in Victoria.
There's a state voice in Victoria. There's a state voice in South Australia.
So a treaty in Victoria now.
So mainstream Australians won the war over the Voice, but they lost the peace against the activists. For now. But,
Although New South Wales has kind of stopped the treaty process in a while. I think they kicked it off in some bogus consultation thing. So, it has. I think also Queensland might have kiboshed it too.
yes,
So,
Queensland have.
yeah.
But you're still seeing it in enough places. The federal government are clearly still. The federal government are committed to it. Committed to it in a more sort of sly way. But
Well,
they definitely are.
This is something to look out for in the budget.
Yeah.
So all the focus on the federal budget is on the headline numbers.
Yeah.
But what we're going to need to look out for is how much funding do they have for treaty and other things like that, like truth telling and what was it called, Makarrata? Remember that Makarrata Commission?
Makarrata.
And the Pauline Hanson cartoon on that was great.
Yes.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
But I think it will be interesting, right? Because if they don't have any funding in the budget, that really is significant.
That's very significant.
Given that the first thing Albanese said when he was elected in 2022 was he did an acknowledgement of country, obviously.
Yeah.
And then he did we're doing voice, treaty and truth.
Yes.
And everyone said, what the hell's that?
Exactly.
Didn't tell us about that before the election.
Yeah.
But yeah, if they don't put any money in the budget for it, that's quite significant. And if they do put money in it, it's also significant.
Yes.
Because they're not listening to the people.
Yes.
So I reckon that's going to be interesting.
What are your thoughts on the budget? What do you think's going to?
Well, it's interesting. I reckon it's going to be a bit of a nothing burger. That they will do some stuff on obviously negative gearing, probably capital gains tax, maybe trusts. And I'm not saying that these things aren't important, but when you look at the broader picture of the Australian economy, where we have massive $1 trillion in debt, where we have an economy that's completely dependent upon immigration as an underpinning of economic growth, when we have record high taxes, when we have spending that's out of control, particularly driven by the NDIS, nothing is, and also a market sector that is growing much, much slower than the government sector. Yeah. So, the vast majority of new jobs are in government or government adjacent sectors. So that's fine as far as it goes. You need nurses and teachers and so forth. But at the end of the day, you still need to have a market sector that's going to generate the actual wealth and the revenue to pay for these things, which we don't have. That's why we've got so much debt. It's not going to do anything to address any of that.
No.
And even Jim Chalmers has kind of acknowledged it, where he said the negative gearing proposals aren't going to bring much revenue in.
No, why would they?
Yeah, which suggests that it's not going to have much of a behavioural change. So it's sort of like, okay, but then why do it? So I'm not diminishing like negative gearing, the impact they can have on rents and so forth. But again, pulling back the lens and saying, is there anything in this budget that's going to fundamentally change the nature of our economy? I'm not sure that there is. What do you reckon?
No, I tend to agree. I think any changes to negative gearing are incredibly risky. I think because if people start to de-invest in housing, then clearly that means that people who can't afford to buy but are renting from those houses are going to be out. They're going to be out of a house.
Yeah.
They're going to be out of a home.
Yeah.
So if there are behavioural changes, it'll be negative for renters essentially. So I think it's very risky to go through with negative gearing changes, especially since that if they do, essentially means that the government lied to Australians for 4 years about, we're not going to change negative gearing. Like as recently as this year, Albanese, has said that we're not going to do anything on negative gearing. Because
how come they get away with it? Or will they get away with it? I think they'll get away with it. I don't think they'll have any.
I think it's sort of the lack of accountability from their political opponents in many ways, or at least over the last since the last election, there certainly has been, because you can't deny that the Liberals are at a very low ebb at the moment. The coalition itself, One Nation's rising, so obviously a lot of the coalition's attention is, in my opinion, wrongly, but it is on rising One Nation and trying to protect their patch rather than trying to expand their patch. And I think that's why they've been able to get away with it. And also because the government and the media need each other to generate attention. And so they're not really going to criticize it too much, I don't believe.
Remember last term when the government broke the promise on the
That's stage 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the coalition went apocalyptic on them, then it didn't have any impact.
No.
And they won the by-election in Dunkley. pretty easily.
Yes. So I think stage 3 is different to negative gearing in the effect that the changes to stage 3 that they underwent helped lower income Australians with further tax breaks after the stage 1 and stage 2 tax cuts.
Yeah.
So I think it was a very populist mainstream appeal in that sense. Whereas with negative gearing, if you actually explain and lay down the mapping of how this will hurt renters if we scrap negative gearing or we tinker with it too much, that can be a very powerful message, I think, because there's been sort of this myth that Labor are now for the working class, or they're now for lower income Australians. It's simply not true. Labor have been diluting the purchasing power of lower income Australians through their inflationary spending.
And mass migration.
And mass migration. And mass migration has been affecting renters and the housing market clearly by surcharging demand. It's just there hasn't been a very strong, from the political class within the centre-right, there hasn't been a very strong messaging to actually lay that all out for the Australian public.
Well, I think cutting immigration is a youth policy as well.
Yes.
Young Australians are the ones that incur probably the greatest costs, not housing, but also competition for jobs, and also the
quality of life at university as well.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Students.
Yeah, that's a huge one. I already think it's an important youth policy. Talking about budgets, we just had the Victorian budget, which you're already laughing about it. But didn't you see there's a surplus? We're laughing about everything's fine. There's a surplus, Saxon. There's no problems here at all.
So in the upcoming financial year, so 26-27, they've projected a $1 billion
That sounds good.
surplus. That operates.
What's wrong with that? That sounds good.
Well, it's fake.
They're operating.
It's illusionary. It's not real.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
So it doesn't include any of the boondoggle infrastructure spending. There's a $7.7 billion cash deficit
Right.
projected for the same year.
Okay.
And net debt in the general government sector alone, so not including any of the non-financial corporates like water utilities, is set to have its debt increased by $10 billion.
Yeah.
So it's not a real operating surplus. They've manufactured this operating surplus to, there's an election in November,
Yep.
and they want to say that we're good with the economy and we're good with the budget, and to sort of nullify and bludgeon what clearly is going to be the Liberals' attack line, is that they can't handle money.
Yeah.
Which is true. It's just flatly true. And I think Victorians know that already. Like, everyone knows that Victoria is out of money, that we're a huge amount of debt.
Yeah. I love it how there's, they just happen to have $199 billion.
Yeah, it's not 200.
You're not 200. Does everyone actually believe that that's the real number?
No.
I reckon the Treasury would have come back with the actual number, which is like 207 or something.
Yeah.
And they go, no, come on, guys. Just, tinker with the parameters.
Yeah.
Get it below 200. So, 199.4. Yeah, it sounds all right.
Yeah.
We'll put that in.
It's like Michael Scott in The Office.
Yeah.
Trying to fix the...
Yeah,
It's like,
just...
trying to tinker. It's like, oh, can you just do the numbers again, mate?
Are you sure it's above? I'm pretty sure it was below 200.
199.
Yeah, okay, that sounds about right.
Oh.
There's no doubt that that's what goes on, obviously. But I with the budget, okay, what's going to happen then in Victoria? So the last time Victoria's economy was stuffed was in the early 90s.
Yeah.
And it's way more stuffed now than it was then when you look at the headline, debt to GDP, taxes to GSP, gross state product. And then basically one of the responses when Kennett got in was to privatise a whole bunch of stuff to get him money and pay down the debt, which basically worked. There's not a whole lot that they can privatise.
Water, essentially.
That's about it. It's about water utility.
The water utility.
Yeah, and that would probably be pretty contentious.
That'd be very unpopular.
And have risks. And so what are they going to do? Is it just going to be? I reckon it's just going to be a federal government bailout, which is already kind of happening.
Yeah. I think as every day goes by, it's more and more likely the federal government will have to bail out the Victorian government.
Yeah.
Because you can't have the finance of the Victorian government being turned over to the banks, essentially. Like, tell
me about that. What do you mean by that?
Well, the banks are significant owners of Victorian.
Yeah, I think it's about 40-something percent
like that.
off the top of my head. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's the single biggest of commercial banks.
Yes. So, I mean, and I think that having if that were to occur, if the federal government didn't bail out the Victorian government and the banks, and the Victorian government basically folded over to the banks, it would not be popular. It would not go well.
No.
With the Victorian people, and understandably so, because banks are for-profit like entities, and that's fine if you're a bank, but it's not. It's not always fine if you're the government.
What's the alternative though?
Well,
doesn't there come a point?
We just have to stop the boondoggle. Like the first thing first is you have to cancel a lot of the boondoggle projects where you've seen sort of the CFMU corruption go through, and a lot of the Labor Party will try and tell you that this can't be done, it's unfair, contracts were signed. But you know what the first thing Daniel Andrews did when he became the Premier? He cancelled the East-West link.
Paid $1 billion to do it,
Exactly. So don't listen. So that would be the first thing. Other than that, they need to significantly and consistently cut spending every year by, let's say, 1 or 2% every year. And compound that as well, to ensure that you're still spending what you need to spend on your hospitals, teachers, but you're cutting out so much of the other useless stuff they spend stuff on, like the treaty, and like a lot of the sort of woke stuff. You need to stop subsidising a lot of things that businesses can afford themselves, and if they can't afford it themselves, then maybe they shouldn't be doing it. So and then also there's clearly a crime problem in Victoria, and I think Victorians are actually becoming desensitized to violent crime. It's a significant problem in our culture here in Victoria, but especially Melbourne. So you saw the tobacco crisis over the last couple of years with illegal tobacco and vapes, where like tobacconists are getting firebombed. And this is a huge insurance problem, not just for tobacconists, but also for stores next to tobacconists or tobacconists. But this has actually started, this sort of gang violence is starting to spread into other entities like pubs and bars. And that's, tobacco has lost its social license. Like, no one really cares, if a tobacconist gets firebombed. I mean, I care, and a lot of, business people care. But the general public sort of turn a blind eye to it. But pubs and bars
it's
are
completely
a completely different thing.
Yeah.
But we've become desensitized to it because it's already happened to one sector of the economy. It's, there's a huge problem because once you become apathetic to a crisis, you stop seeing it as something that needs to be fixed. If you're not sensitive to an issue, you don't see the urgency to do something about it.
Yeah.
So I think that that's something that needs to change.
Yeah. If you want to know what a progressive government looks like, this is it. Daniel Andrews always used to say, this is the most progressive government, most progressive state in the country. Well,
he was right.
This is what a progressive, this is what progressive states look like.
Exactly.
So the only, I guess, silver lining is that this is a warning, which I think is actually being heeded.
Yes.
Yes. So that's the positive. Yeah. But speaking of bailouts, your footy club Essendon might need a bailout. It's not looking.
This is atrocious.
Not looking.
It's atrocious. Bring back James.
James Hird. There's a call.
That's
I'll get around that.
Oh, absolutely. I love James Hird, and personal hero. Legend at the club. What happened to him during the whole drug saga was completely wrong. Yeah. And he was let down by many people, including people within the Essendon Football Club.
Yeah.
We're not going too great.
No.
But it's okay. The hardest part about, the second or third year of the rebuild is the first 10 months of it. I don't know.
There's always a rebuild.
It's atrocious.
Yeah. So I'm hopeful they're going to bring back the state of origin. I've heard rumblings, but I don't know.
So I think it's going to happen every year now.
Have they already announced it?
Well, they had it earlier this year, Victoria and Western Australia.
Yeah, not a real one though.
No, it's not a real one, but it's not.
It used to be in season.
But they won't. The in season carnival style state of origin will never come back.
Well, they should.
It's never going to come back. I don't know what to tell you.
Nothing had it.
I don't know what to tell you. I'll just.
All right. We'll leave it there. I think we can pick up the state of origin again. Got a lot to say about the AFL and sporting codes in general. But Saxon, good on you. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel.